Right, so let's talk a little bit about Cloud9. The problem here, Rich, and I want to see where you're at on this one, is I genuinely don't know how two of these, I've never even seen two of these players play. So I've never seen Berserker and Winsome players from what I remember. Like I might have seen him in the odd game through an LCK or something, but I've obviously seen Fodge play at top lane, but he's now playing mid lane. They got Summit, who I definitely know from the Sandbox days, was once upon a time a very good top laner in Korea, and famously, much like the other name I always mentioned, Keen, had that vibe where it's like, I mean, at least Keen at one spot in time had a good, I guess Sandbox was good like 3 years ago or something. They were the players where they were supposed to be sort of like, oh, he's like the Chovy of top lane and the others are all shit and they hold him back. He had that kind of vibe, so I get why the hype around him is there, and obviously they kept Blabber. So what do you know any of these players? What do you think of this mix? I feel like this is one of the most volatile off seasons I've ever seen from a team.
So, I mean, if you read Reddit this morning, then you know Cloud9 at least dodged one bullet, which is apparently Nemesis turned down a coaching role there. So
okay.
Every Cloud. In terms of the players themselves, I'd be lying if I said I had like a good read on these players. Like I just don't really know that. Even Summit, like I'm not super familiar with how good he's been. I've heard that he has been good in his role in his region, but I don't know his level of English. I really don't know. To me, the interesting thing about, or the most interesting thing about this team is LS, because LS is someone who I think if he's
No, as far as I know, that's still like a rumor.
Anything I, just as a caveat, like anything I say is purely based on publicly available rumor. Yeah. It's not anything that I've heard behind the scenes or anything. So if the rumor is true that LS is the coach, and that is the case, then I think that's the most interesting X factor here, because I think he's someone that if he feels comfortable with the people that are around him, he is someone who could legitimately have like a really interesting impact on the team. I use the word interesting because I think it could go in a bunch of different ways. I think it could be really positive, or I think it could maybe be somewhat negative, not necessarily because of his game IQ or something like that. But LS isn't someone that, based again on the publicly available data, that I really trust to always be available. They always say in sports, like the best ability is availability. And I'm just a bit concerned that this guy has like a lot of health issues and, needs a lot of time to himself to mentally reset or whatever. Again, some of this is conjecture. I'm only going based off what he himself has said. But we also saw that when was it Gravity he was coaching, and some of the other stints that he's had coaching teams, like going way back, there always seems to be a point in the season where he just needs to disappear or go or whatever. And I'm just a bit concerned about his sticking power. Again, that's not analyzing him as a person making a conscious decision, but I do think this guy has a lot of baggage, even if it's just like health baggage. So I'm just concerned that, while I'm very happy that Nemesis isn't going to be there, because I think it'd be really bad for the team, but also really bad for LS. If he has some good people around him, then people that he's comfortable with, I think it could be a really big X factor on this team. If he doesn't, then I'm concerned, because I think there are so many potential coin flips on this team. A lot of that is also a conjecture on my part, because I just don't know these players that well, that I do kind of fear for how this is all going to come together smoothly. If you just look at all the names on paper, regardless of how much or little you know about them, and then add LS as well, can you really say with any confidence, like, yeah, this team's going to do really well? Like, I have zero confidence in this team going well, but I also could see a scenario where it could go really well. But again, I'm completely ignorant on half the lineup. So that's why I focused on that aspect.
One, as a quick sidebar, I noticed on Reddit itself, according to Jack, who knows if he's trolling, but he claims it is a real comment. On Reddit, Jack has posted, and he says that they actually offered Nemesis the mid lane spot. He just didn't want to join. So, by the way, that in itself, I'm already like, what is going on at Cloud9? By the way, this is why you don't let people from the LS Enclave into your team unless you want them to do this. Because this is that sounds like that Max Waldo guy all over the fucking place right there, mate. And also this LS angle. And also, I want to get Crumbs' thoughts on this. I haven't spoken to LS about this. I haven't attempted to, because one thing I don't actually try to do is, unless I basically don't believe in unsolicited advice, especially not with people who are friends of mine. Like, if they ask me for advice, I'll give them the advice. Otherwise, I don't pry, like I let people do what they want to do with their job. So I haven't tried to reach out to LS and even ask if this is a real thing. But one thing I found very weird is, unless I'm mistaken, I feel like this move's coming out of nowhere. Like, I don't actually get the vibe LS is ever going to coach in the LCS, especially if they have to move to America. Like, he told me he always wanted to live in Korea and he had to. So do you have any info on this?
I don't have any info that isn't public from this, but the first thing is, if you're signing all these Koreans that no one has really played with, you probably would want somebody that speaks Korean. And while Reignover was the head coach before, after Minty stepped down, LS does make some sense because he would probably be one of the players that would have suggested, or one of the people who have suggested these players, can communicate with them. But the interesting thing about how you landed here, to me, is you had Reignover, who had been planning to be the head coach since he joined Cloud9 as the academy coach, right? The idea was, we're going to level you up in academy and then you're going to go to be head coach. Didn't like the position. Then Mithy comes in, takes a position, and now Mithy departs. So it seems to me that the head coaching role of Cloud9 is way tougher than a lot of the people that had initially signed up for it wanted it to be. And so they're leaving now. And so it doesn't seem to me like the head coach of Cloud9 was the role that people thought it was when they initially joined, and now you wanted somebody that can take that spot and at the same time can rebuild the roster with a different twist. So the Korean signings make me think that LS could actually be a real thing, and at the same time, just like TL, could be a huge brand move, right? Could be a huge brand move. If these guys are hit, like, you're going to have some mega bucks coming in from this one. Although it's interesting that he's already with T1, so you'd have to actually maybe buy him out or wait for the end of that contract, however that plays out. But I don't know about the Korean players, right? I haven't seen these guys play before. Sven and I believe Berserker are probably just splitting some time until Sven can join the roster once more. And Fudge's champion pool, when he played in Academy, could have been the mid lane champion pool. But, like, I'm one of the few people that was in on this, but everybody is always saying how Fudge was trash when he joined the LCS. He's just getting used to it. And then, he got amazing. Like, he literally played the same level he did at Academy. Like, this is it. He just dipped when he got into the LCS and then got back to where he was before. He's been really consistent, minus that one period where he had some woes. So I think that he'll actually do fine in mid. But what mostly interests me about this team is, how are they going to be coached, and is there a chance of implosion? Because it seems like everywhere there's a lot of explosives in this team that could go by the wayside. And you also have a lot of people departing the Cloud9 organization, not just players, but this season you just had a lot of people, just random staff members constantly leaving. So there seems to be a need for a major overhaul from this org.
I have a couple of thoughts on this as well. If it's true that Jack made that comment about in reference to Nemesis and assuming that he wasn't trolling or whatever, first of all, it gives more credence to the idea that the LS thing might be real, right? I think that's a fair jump to make, while not conclusive. Also, it does really make me question Jack, to be honest, at least in this decision, because if that is true, it's not really about what my thoughts are on Nemesis, like as a person or as a player. Like, it's easy to go overboard on like how bad Nemesis is. Nemesis is not a bad mid laner. It's just the fact that he's on one of the biggest and best teams in the West, and he probably wasn't as good as his teammates. That's really, what most of the criticism was, and that there were potentially upgrades. So he's fine as a mid laner. He's not a bad player. But if your game plan is basically to get LS as your coach, and then his best friend / podcast buddy, echo chamber dudes to like play mid, this seems like a terrible idea. And as you said, already adding like Max Waldo into the equation, this is going to be a complete disaster. I mean, the best way I can put this scenario, let's take Nemesis out of this. Let's just pretend that's not even a thing, right? Because apparently he turned it down or whatever anyway. If I said to you, place your bets, will LS still be there by the end of the year? You would say what?
I mean, you'd probably have to bet no, just because of all the things that could happen to him.
It seems unlikely, and I think if you're making a decision of this kind, whether it be a player or a coach, yes, there are elements where you're flipping something and you say, if it goes really well, I'm willing to take the risk. If it doesn't, a la, if you're in season 6, you're looking to sign Forgiven or whatever it is, stuff like that. But with LS and with a coach, I would have to have some level of trust that this would last more than like a split. And I really don't have any confidence in that. I do think there is a chance that the coin lands on heads, but I think the coin is misshapen. I don't think it's a 50-50 flip. I feel that this is like a 10% chance that it all goes swimmingly, and LS can, maybe can even like revolutionize an aspect of coaching in doing so or something, right? But I just think if it's true, and again, we don't know that it's true, I think it's a weird decision, and contacting Nemesis is a fireable offence in my opinion, but it is what it is. And as for Fudge going to mid lane, yeah, I kind of side with Crumbs and a lot of people who've said not just like the champion pool overlap, but the way he plays his lane is kind of akin to the way a lot of players approach playing mid lane. So I don't think it would be that surprising if he was, at a similar level playing mid. I just really don't know enough about the other players to judge where these guys would be. If I was making a tier list of LCS, I would put them fairly low down just because of that unknown aspect, and that obviously you're dealing with imports who I'm assuming at least won't have perfect English. So yeah, and the LS factor is so flip. So I don't see this as a serious contender until I'm proved otherwise, but I'm very open to being proved wrong because I really don't know the players well enough.
If it's a coin flip, I think it would just be the move where you're thinking, well, it could go terribly wrong, but at least there's a pretty high ceiling. If it goes well, if everything, all these moving parts actually work together, the ceiling would be very high. If the Korean players happen to be great, if LS holds it down, does a great job, like you say, could revolutionize something about coaching, put his theories to the test here, then you could actually end up with a crazily good roster that nobody saw coming. So I think that's the upside that Jack is seeing here, is that the ceiling for this team is unknown, but all you know is that it's pretty high up there.
Yeah, the problem I have on the LS one, which might surprise people because obviously they know I'm a friend of his, and I said the same thing about the SKT drama last year, where, spoiler, he absolutely was going to be the coach of SKT, but as I alluded to, SKT and certain people within the org, T1 now, do not fuck with other aspects of LS that are not about him being a coach. So the problem I have always is this, just knowing him as a person, and I've no doubt he's said he's done those bloody, I think, borderline unethical, like, live therapy sessions with that fucking guy who's apparently some sort of like psychologist or something. I personally think that's beyond fun, but let's make that aside.
Yeah, what? You've never seen what is this?
Are you on your mind? You aren't aware there's a guy who goes on Twitch and pretends to be like a fucking psychiatrist.
Oh,
has like live therapy sessions. LS did one of those. He's gone on those and done them. Yeah. Oh, no. Like, he's been on that guy's show.
You know, this used to be a meme, right? When it was Katy Perry doing it. This shit was a massive joke that people are doing this in person, and then suddenly it turns into an actual channel.
Like, listen, I don't know that guy's status. Maybe he actually does have the qualification. But I just personally think it's a bit dodgy to sort of like lure people in to do that publicly. And then when you're going to talk about all your insecurities and your by the way, spoiler, the internet is a faucet of shit directed at your soul. Why would you give those people the blueprint and the fucking map to destroy you utterly? But anyway, put that to one side. My point is, like, if you know LS as a person, he's a very troubled individual because of the life path he's chosen. And by the way, he's also in an incredibly high pressure job. Like, if people don't know it leaks out all the time on social media. He's a guy who just wrecks himself with his sleep schedule and how much work he does in a day and how many things he tries to fit in. Basically, he's the guy who can't let any one aspect go because he thinks he's sort of like, it's like FOMO. It's like, fuck, what if I let that go and then someone else gets ahead of me? Right, first of all, that mentality will break in a coaching job. Like, coaching is the worst gig ever for that, because sometimes you're doing an amazing job. Let's say you were doing such an awesome job, but some of the effects are only going to kick in 3 weeks from now. Doesn't matter. Every week you lose, you're an idiot, a moron, you should be fired. Some of your own players, by the way, before the effects kick in, might think some of that shit and might go, I don't know, a bit questionable. I thought this guy was supposed to be a genius. Even worse, by the way, not with this lineup, but God forbid you ever flamed any of those players ever in the past. And then they use that, the one moment they think you fucked up to like bring that up. That in itself is going to be a nightmare, mate. I can tell you from my own experience. I can't get that fucking second beer in an after party, Rich, because it's like a fucking swarm of loser pro players in Counter-Strike who've just had their third beer. They see me and it's like fucking Terminator. They have to come and start debating me about Counter-Strike, even as I'm explicitly telling them I don't want to talk about Counter-Strike right now. It's not the venue. And secondly, I might have to take you outside if you don't fuck off right now. So he's not going to do that. He's going to have these arguments. And then lastly, as you alluded to, he has a lot of problems with his health and a lot of other things around him. So all I would say is it's a powder keg. So personally, I wouldn't gamble on that. Like, there's a lot of things I would gamble on. The problem is the upside is mega. Like, what people probably aren't considering is this. Presumably, if he did this coaching job, there'll be no more streaming, or he'll only do that as a partial thing on the side, right? If he was to literally limit how much stuff he publicly puts out and pump all of what he's doing and his work into the team, I could see that being a massive upside. Like, imagine this guy actually for real, like hooked into a couple of things in the meta, a few champions, a comp, a fucking item. Imagine you really had that, but your team just had it for like 2 months before everyone else actually figured out it's good. Because remember, the bizarre thing about LS's career as a public thinker is he goes through that mad like crucible that's supposed to take like decades for thought normally, where initially they all make fun of you and then they fight you and then, you know, that whole thing, and at the end you win or whatever. Like, he does that. So what's mad is, in a mad way, the only reason half these fuckers even eventually do consider his things is because of the controversy of him bringing them forwards, then some players adopting it, then is it a meme or does it really work? Well, imagine you now didn't have any of that process and it just went into his team and you had to basically decide as an outsider with no info on why they're doing it. Why is he doing these things? So listen, that sounds great. The problem with that is that's a movie plot. That's not real life, is it? Like, that you can't take that as you want. Like, yes, it's worth all the things Thorin said about how he might mentally collapse, players might hate him, he might not be able to cope with living in America, and he might leave the team for 1 year. If I do that plus minus at the end, I have to fucking say no. That's why I say no, Rich. I can't go in on this move. Even though I will agree, if you're going to make a crazy ass roster like this, that probably is why you would do it. It's like you've got some guy who's your inside man, as it were. The one last thing I'll say as an upside is this: if somehow you can avoid all those pitfalls and potholes, you do also get one other mad upside, which is, imagine the fucking talent pipeline you could create from Korea. Because remember, what I assume they're trying to do with this Berserker guy is their logic is, it's like the whole Hooney thing of like, he was a practice partner on a team and they were going to use him a year or two later, but we got him now and he's really good now. Like, what you're basically hoping is this guy's the next Viper or Deft or something, and you've got him already. At the beginning, you don't even have to pay the buyout, like the enormous buyout you'd need for Viper now. You can just get him now, like 2 years before. Listen, that's a great idea, and I think there's even some merit to it, but the problem is, it's like you said about the whole language thing. You are committing a massive amount to that. You're not really just even signing this year's team. You're saying, I'm sort of the first Korean LCS team where I'm going to have coaches and other players that can speak Korean, and you probably have to learn some English, but, you know, we're going to be like the different environment. You can listen. It also, again, that sounds great in a movie. I don't know in real life if you make that work. That sounds like a bit too difficult to manage, as it were.
It's interesting because Jack was the first owner to move away from an all-Korean team because of the language barrier. So now going back to it is, you know, a revisit to it, I guess.
Oh, and I'll just throw this out there as well. Listen, Jack, if you thought fucking Jensen was a little bit fucking, you know, a little bit difficult to deal with from time to time, could be a little bit of a princess, you don't know the bullet you just fucking dodged with Nemesis, my dude. As Rich just said, Nemesis literally played for a team with almost all LEC level talent, and he used to look around and think, these guys are all shit, they don't know what they're doing. Like, you can't please certain people, mate. Like, the best thing that guy ever did was stop being a pro player. It actually allows him to have credibility because he doesn't have to put his stupid ideas to the test and show that he's just fucking completely delusional, is he? So again, I think everyone dodged the bullet on that one. It's even better for Nemesis, by the way. He gets to keep living in a fantasy world where if he does things on 7 ping, somehow I'm supposed to believe he'd do that on 30 ping back in Europe. Like, okay, cool, I guess. You can have that storyline. Want to see more cool, funny, interesting clips based on topics from my content? Well, subscribe to this channel then, or, you know, be a pleb and don't.